I am Anna Seewald, and this is Authentic Parenting, a podcast about growing ourselves while raising our children. I'm a psychologist, educator, and parent coach, and on this podcast, I explore how you can connect to your authentic self, practice radical self-care, and raise emotionally healthy children. Let's break the generational cycle of trauma for a more peaceful, kind, and compassionate world. Today, Mindwandering, how to improve your mood and boost your creativity. Get this, about 50% of our waking time, we are not present. Our mind wanders. Where does it go? It goes into the future or to the past. Mind wandering is a unique mind state. Our brains are noisy. Certain regions are always grinding away at involuntary activities like daydreaming, worrying about the future, and self-chatter. Mind wandering, while it can tag your attention away from the present and contribute in extreme cases to anxiety and depression, also has some wonderful benefits. I am speaking with Professor Moshe Bar, the author of Mindwandering, How Your Constant Mental Drift Can Improve Your Mood and Boost Your Creativity. Professor Bar is an internationally renowned cognitive neuroscientist. He's the former director of the Cognitive Neuroscience Lab at Harvard Medical School and the Massachusetts General Hospital. He has a PhD in cognitive neuroscience from the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. For his outstanding research and academic achievements, he has received many awards and honors, including the prestigious 21st Century Science Initiative Award from the McDonnell Foundation and the Hebb Award from the International Neural Network Society. He headed the Gonda Multidisciplinary Brain Research Center at Bar Ilan University in Israel until recently. His research focuses on various aspects of brain function, including memory, foresight, mental load, mind-wandering, mood, and creativity. He also contributed to the development of conscious cities, which takes into account the effects of urban design on mental health. I asked him about this in the beginning of our conversation, and I find it quite fascinating. He has published over 80 research articles, edited 2 scientific books, and published the popular book Mindwandering. He lives in Israel in an unusual, round, igloo-like house. He showed me around, and it was quite interesting. I would definitely want to live in such a space. If you're like me, then you most likely enjoy learning about how the brain works. And you'll appreciate this conversation about the different dynamic states of your mind. Mind-wandering, mindfulness, immersion, and learn how you can boost your mood and creativity by unleashing your mind. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation as well as his book, which I highly recommend. It's written for lay people. It's filled with amazing scientific insights. It has great storytelling and some practical tools in the back of the book. Please enjoy. So I want to ask you about your house, number one, because as you write in your book, our environment influences state of our mind and our mood, our creativity. So can you tell me why you live in an igloo? Or if it's an igloo?
Yeah, I can start from the research, but it will be a pretend if I say that I was looking for an igloo. It's just that it was a coincidence because I did work on preference for curvature, and I can tell you in a few words about this. And only last week, I gave a talk in Washington, D.C. in an architecture design meeting called Intentional Spaces. And it turns out that all these people are already familiar with our work on this because, coming naive to architecture, I thought that this is the first thing that architects think about. Well, maybe other than the art itself, but thinking about what does the shape of the space induce in the people that inhabit this space, right? But it turned out, no, that it's new. And for them to think about the experience of the humans that occupy their space is fascinating for them. And I'm glad that they're open to this. And people have been talking in this conference and other places about ways to implement the subjective experience into their designs. And when you kind of quoted or referred to what I was saying about how the shape of the space affects your state of mind, we have to keep in mind that this thing is reciprocal. So when you come in a certain state of mind, you perceive the same space differently than when you're in a different space. So if you come from home grumpy, the space would have some sort of appearance and influence on you. And if you're happy and open to the world, then the space is different. So it works both ways. But yes, so initially, back then I was still at Harvard and we're just playing. You talked about love of my job, my profession. So I keep referring experiments as playing. We played here and we played there. So I feel like it's a game. But even when I say play, these are serious experiments that were done rigorously and published in good places. So the idea there was to look at the effect of curvature on the way we feel, the way we interpret, the way we decide to approach or to avoid. And it started from a little caricature that I saw in an old cognitive psychology book where you see a person standing, it was just a line drawing, and another person approaching him with the arm like this. And it seemed like the shape of the elbow would affect your interpretation of the intentions of this guy's approaching. If it was sharp, it seemed like this guy is about to hit the other guy. If it was round, it was all in my mind. If it was round, you think it's coming to hug this person, right? So just a little corner. And I told my students then, okay, let's take everyday objects and see if people prefer the curvature, the curved objects or the sharp objects. And two things to keep in mind here. First of all, when you choose objects for such experiments, it's important for you to kind of isolate the parameters, right? You don't want to use in the sharp objects things like, knives and broken glass, and in the smooth ones, in the angular one, curved ones, pillows and kittens and whatever, because then if you find preference for the curved ones, it's because semantically the objects are more positive there. So the idea is to choose everyday objects without any emotional valence, right? Like wristwatch, sofa, suitcase, flowering pot, a coffee mug, all these everyday objects that we see. And to generate for each one of them a version that is sharp, even if we had to play with Photoshop, take a cup. So this cup has round shape here. So the student will take it and make it also sharp. So we have one sharp and one smooth. And very convincingly and very quickly, this was probably the easiest experiment I've done in my life. It was 2 weeks. And then it was also accepted for publications in 2 weeks, which was also unheard of because it was so simple and made so much sense. So we found that people preferred significantly more the objects when the curvature was smooth. So this was fun, and it was cited in magazines that I'm not used to be cited in, like Cosmopolitan and places like this. And I welcome this. I want to reach as many people as possible with our science. But for our scientists, of course, the next question is why? Why would we prefer the curved objects? So, some male friends of mine, like, of course we like curves, but I don't think this is the right explanation. So we started to think about what might be the difference and why would people prefer the curved ones. And one guess we had, and that's where we stopped afterwards, was that maybe the objects with the sharp angles convey some kind of threat or some kind of, innate subconscious feeling of fear. I should be afraid of this thing. So we put people in MRI, functional MRI, right, in a magnet as we call it, and we scanned their brains while they were looking at pictures of objects with sharp versus curved contour. And we found that there's a critical structure in the brain called the amygdala, you might have heard of, that was more significantly active for the objects with a sharp contour, okay? And this was really exciting for us because up to this point, people would activate the amygdala with really negative objects, like with scary dogs with their teeth out, or with dead bodies, or with accidents, or whatever, right? So now we take wristwatch and a sofa and a cup of coffee, and we activate the same region. And so this kind of supported, but this was just initial support for our hunch that it might be related to some kind of a feeling of fear. So when I returned to Israel about 10 or 11 years ago, the dean of the architecture department in the Technion up north was curious about this, and he said, let's try this here. I have a PhD student who's interested. Let's try to do this in 3D. Let's try to create spaces which sharp and curved contours. So of course we didn't build buildings, but we built buildings in virtual reality. And then we had people walk around these virtual rooms with EEG connected to their head, with the galvanic skin response to find their heart, blood pressure and heart rate and everything. And we replicated this idea that indeed people, when they are in these round spaces, feel much better. I don't know if I should take the laptop and show you around the house.
Please, yes. Yeah, I would
Yes?
love, yes, I would love that. Are you kidding me? That's such a privilege.
That I see the mess and
It's okay. I'm not going to be judgmental. It's creative mess. And can I ask you, was this house, the one that you live in, was designed specifically for you with that purpose, or it already existed?
no, it already existed. This is a house from the 70s. The one I was living in when I wrote the book is demolished. So they kicked me out. I was renting. They kicked me out. And then I was living sadly in a square penthouse. And I thought to myself, it's so boring. I have corners here. Not really, but still, I didn't feel as good. Here, you just, I bring people here, and after they get over the surprise, like, oh my God, there are no corners, and they make jokes about how do you place your furniture and how do you hang things on the wall if there's no, there are a few straight lines here. But after a while, you do feel like it gets to you. And it's really hard to put your finger on what is it, but I don't know, it's tempting to talk about the womb and how you're feeling embraced and kind of, but yeah, it's a good feeling in here.
Yeah, I can tell it immediately. I see a small portion of it, but it does give me that feeling. And it's interesting how you said it's bidirectional. Your state of mind when you enter into a space affects you and vice versa. My daughter is a teenager, she's in high school. She comes home every day and her school is nice. And she says to me, my school feels like a prison. I hate it. And so it's so true. But when I went to her school, it's bright and sunny. It's a really nice design. And I came home, I'm like, wow, like if I hadn't seen her school, I would take her word for it that it's oppressive and it's a prison. But I guess her state of mind interprets the environment differently.
Yeah, I agree with you. You mentioned light, and that's another topic that you would expect people to respect the importance of light and add more windows in houses. And my architect friends can't really explain to me why is it that they don't include more spaces in more round spaces. I'm looking for pictures rather than disconnecting here. I'm looking for pictures of the house so
I am very attuned to my environment, and I always have been. I manipulate, design things to feel a certain way. I'm very into this. And I think this could be used in education, this research that you're talking about, especially, there's a lot of stress and trauma in today's world. If we want to help our children, we want to create environments that support their learning, make them feel relaxed and safe. I think there's so much potential in this.
I agree. You're right on target. And that's exactly where the discussion was heading after these findings, because then you start thinking about what's the role of this space and how do we facilitate its function, right? So if it's a kindergarten or school, you want to make people feel more creative maybe and more attentive. But in other places, you want people to feel more safe, right? And we had an architect student of mine and me had a paper in an article in The Guardian a few years ago called Conscious Cities, a manifesto of conscious designs or conscious cities. You can find it on my page. And there too, we talked about the city itself as being designed to serve the function that it's meant to, right? So if you have the exits of a soccer stadium, right, all these really excited and wild and maybe aggressive audiences coming out, you don't want them to come out straight to the back of a kindergarten, right? You want them to be more controlled, maybe more split, and they need public transportation. So you need to take into account when you're designing the actual function that the space and the design should take.
Oh, that's pretty fascinating. So I don't know how old your children are now, but did you notice their behavior changes, like when they are raised in this kind of environment, or they didn't grow up in this house?
Well, they didn't grow up. They love being here. They love bringing their friends. Main attraction for them to bring their friends over, and everybody gets excited. And in this second igloo that I live in now, it's also like it feels more freedom, like I have. So you can see that. Here's my youngest daughter. She's 12.
Oh, nice.
So let me show you from the outside. And what's nice here is that I have another igloo next by. There's another family living in so you see one igloo here.
I see. It's pretty fascinating.
Anyway, but you can
Oh,
tell it's from the 70s.
yeah. Interesting.
Yes.
Wow. I
Yeah, I'm
love it.
glad you like the
I do love it.
design.
Yeah. Yeah, I do love it.
Okay.
I would like to live in that kind of environment. I like your office area. I don't know if this is your office, but the windows makes it.
It is my office. You can see all the books.
Yeah, it is your office because you bring the outdoor in. That's the feeling that I like.
And I think this was when I was living in the US, my wife and I used to look for, what they call modernist houses and Bauhaus. That was their creed, really, what you just said, to bring the outside in. So you feel like you're in nature, but you're still shielded and sheltered. So, yeah, I like this.
Okay, we wondered a little bit, but I was curious about this. I want to ask you, well, let's start about mind wandering, what it is, where it's originated, and the positive and negative aspects of mind wandering.
So mind wandering is really a collection of processes that we refer to as wandering. So if you have to find only one definition, it would say the things that go on in your mind when you're not busy, when you're not busy with a specific task. So if I talk with you now, I'm busy and try not to wander anywhere else, right? If I'm flying a plane or driving a car or whatever I do, my mind needs to be on the task, right? But every time I'm free to my own devices, then my mind is free to go elsewhere. And where are the places it goes to? This is the collection of processes that I said at the beginning. So you may be just doing some planning, right? So I'm just sitting on the sofa or in the bus or wherever and thinking about what should I make for dinner, right? Or how should I prepare for the interview with you? Or what should I dress tomorrow for the meeting I had with an investor? Okay, so all of these are just mundane, but they're critical. We are busy planning way more than we think we are. Okay. And this could be even tiny little plans. So I want to get off the sofa and go to the fridge and I feel a cake, right? But there is a chocolate cake and carrot cake. What should I choose, right? So I already run all this simulation. We talk about mental simulations. I kind of try to foresee based on my experience, how do I feel after I eat chocolate cake versus carrot cake? How much is left from each? How fresh is each, right? So it's a silly little example, but just I make it deliberately silly and simple because we're busy with this all the time. Of course, if you have to decide about buying a house or a car or getting married or whatever, everybody understands that we do all these deliberations. But what I'm trying to convey here is that even with the little decisions, we do have to run all these preparations, all these plans, and take all these arguments, refer back to memory and to our experience, and project back to the future, etc. Another aspect of mind wandering, it might be my favorite, is what we call creative incubation. So when we actually think consciously or not, or we're not necessarily aware of all the sub-processes there, but you have some problem that you want to solve or some topic that you want to develop, and your mind is busy with it when you're not busy with something else. So this is part of the reason that part of the things I'm preaching for in the book, only in retrospect, I understood I didn't sit down to preach about mind wandering, but I just realized to what extent, and from interviews such as this and feedback I get from readers, to what extent people feel somewhat liberated, that a scientist told them, listen, mind wandering is good. So my kids not only grow up in a roundhouse, they also grow up with a father that tells them, you can stay in the sofa, that's fine. You don't do anything. Because I know this is like all the creative juices are coming out. If you're busy and go from A to B, B to C, C to D, then you really don't have these creative pauses. So it's a collection of simulations that go on when we're not doing anything. So that said, I don't want to glorify mind wandering excessively because there are also things that we don't want to be busy doing. So for example, is ruminations. Ruminations when people are anxious or depressed and they keep going over and over with repetitive thoughts over some topic that bothers them. So obviously when your rumination is also some sort of a mind wandering, but this is something that's much less desired. I have a whole startup company now that the main action there is to make people stop ruminating by thinking somewhere else, by distracting the thinking pattern. We call it facilitating thought progression, but the idea is really to make their thinking unstuck and advance more associatively. So that's basically in a nutshell what's mind wandering and when is it good and when it's not. Yeah.
It was said that 47% of the time our mind is wandering and we're not present. And we can't control, right, consciously when we enter into a mind wandering state when we're out. But when we come out of it, we recognize that we were in it. But here is my question. When you're in it, it feels longer, but how has it been measured? Like, what's the longest period of time you get stuck in mind wandering state? Is it minutes or is it seconds?
When we are engaged in this for too long, it starts to be a psychiatric disorder. So there's like in the DSM, you can find criteria for, I think it's called daydreaming, not mind wandering there, but it is some sort of detachment. You're just too much not in the present. It's a good question. I don't think there are time estimates. I would say that it's no longer than minutes. I think if you mind wander to, more than 5 minutes. And also, don't forget that even though you're really completely accurate here, we're not aware that we wander while we wander. But if we're in a normal environment, everyday environment, there are a lot of distractions that get us out, right? So even if I wander, I just sit here and I wander, there's a little noise from that my little daughter does there, and it disrupts my wandering. So to really mind wander without interruption, I did build in the lab now. I haven't started playing with it, but I built this isolated room that is dark. You don't hear, you don't see, you don't smell, you don't anything. And the idea is with zero sensory stimulation. And this would be the environment to maximize mind wandering. But even then, I think that there's a limit to how much you can. So an informal estimate will be a few minutes, not more than that. I think if you mind wandered for an hour, there might be a problem there.
Yeah, it's like more dissociation and that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Yes, that's the word.
So in the sensory deprivation tank, then, like I'm thinking about it and I'm getting a panic attack. I would never enter into that kind of environment when it's dark and there's no sensory stimuli. I can feel that it's unsettling for me already. What are your experiments show? Do people mind wander into more negative places, like more trauma based or more positive? It seems like it could be more negative because if you're stuck without stimulation.
Well, I think it really varies because it depends on what state you're in, what are your dispositions. So if you're a depressed personality, you would gravitate to the negative, right? If you're very happy, you might be going somewhere else. If you're thinking about creative, if you have some creative problems on your plate, then this will be good. If you come up with a good idea while you wander, then it elevates your mood. So I think that you're right that to begin with, a dark room with nothing in it is more scary than exciting. But if you get over this initial fear, I think it really depends on what you came with into this room. And this brings up a related point, which I did mention in the book. And now I know so much about mind wandering. I know I'm going now for a walk or for a run. And I just paid my bills. And that's what occupies. I'm really pissed at the electricity company or whatever. And now if I go, I know that this will occupy, that even though I can't choose what to wonder about, right? I can't direct my wandering. I know it's a statistical thing. If these are the topics that are unfinished in my mind, they will continue to grind, right? So I actually want to replace the content, just increasing the likelihood of something good coming up while I wander. So maybe read something nice, some poem, or have a nice phone call with somebody I like. And then the spontaneous wandering might actually be more desirable. I don't have control, but I can increase the likelihood of good things coming up.
Yeah, I practice this in my life and I know it. It's like sort of that recency effect. Or before bed, whatever you consume, it tends to, if you're consuming a horror movie, you're going to have negative dreams or if you're learning something at night.
Yeah.
I utilize this. If I'm stuck on a project and I need creative ideas, I do think about this before I go on a walk. And then I'm like, ideas are floating and it's like, wow, this is great. I really love that part about your research, about the creativity and boosting the mood aspect of it. There's a lot of usefulness for parents because, as you know, parents have a lot of stress in their life. The cognitive load is too cramped in there. So I want you to talk about the cognitive load and the narrow and open thinking.
Yeah. Well, obviously, I'm also a parent and I love, love, love being a parent. So it is close to my heart. And I do give an example or two about, a while ago, I'll just make a quick interrupt, but it is related. So when I was still living in the US, I was consulting to Procter & Gamble. And the guy who was hiring me there was a great guy. His name, he was a chief creative officer. He's retired now. And so we talked about, and initially when as a scientific and academic snob, for me to consult to an advertiser or to some other company seemed like a dark side. But then I was thinking, they give me challenges and I don't want to work. It's almost like, whoring my profession. But it was interesting how quickly, just with with Mindwandering, how quickly I would bring their question to my world. So they would say like, we have a new shampoo and we want to place it at CVS. What do you have in Princeton? Do you have CVS or?
Yes, we have. Yes, yes.
So how do we place it so that there's like 700 types of shampoos. How do we make ours? And all of them now have a stamp of new, new, new. So you really get desensitized. So I was talking with them. So initially it seemed to me like a silly question that only people that care about marketing. Then I was thinking about the state of mind of the person who's entering the aisle, right? The CVS and walking along the aisle. So I told him about, this was the beginning of this research I also mentioned in the book, about exploration and exploitation. So you can be in a certain state of mind in one extreme that's exploring. So you can think about your viewing point the scope of the way you examine the world is much wider, right? You look at the entire world, you're open to anything. I don't know if you do meditation, but they talk about the same thing also, diffused attention, where everything is even, everything is open, and everything is interesting. And then also in your thinking, you're more open and you're so thirsty for new experiences or for learning new things that you're able to tolerate uncertainty, because people in other conditions, they can't stand uncertainty. The other state, the other extreme, I mean, we kind of swing between these two ends, never in one end, is to be exploitatory, where we exploit the familiar. We save resources by going to the familiar. We are more safe when we go to the familiar. We can allocate our resources to something else because we made non-choices. The outcome is already clear. So for you entering CVS to notice the new shampoo, and of course, this is not a conversation about shampoo. You can take this to anything in your life. For you to notice this novelty, this something that might be interesting, something that might be worth exploring, you need to be in a certain state of mind, which is exploratory, right? When you're rushing to the train and you're all stressed out about missing this meeting, you won't be noticing new flowers that opened up along the way or a new building or whatever, because you're like tunnel vision. You're just running to the train. That's where you are. But so that's where I gave the example of a mother or father entering CVS with 3 crying babies, or I don't know, 3 crying babies, it's toddlers, different ages. You really just want to get your shampoo and get out of CVS, right? So you go to the one that you're familiar with. And again, this is like a metaphor for the rest of what we do in life. You go to the familiar because this will get you the outcome as quickly as possible. You are not in a state of mind to explore now. So the kids with demands and the crying babies and all these things, this pose what we call cognitive load. And cognitive load doesn't come only from precious kids. It also comes from an annoying boss that needs a lot of things from you by tomorrow, or some things you have to attend, some pile of papers on your desk. Everything that's kind of piling up in like working memory, things you need to do, your to-do list, your mental to-do list, loads up your cognitive resources. So you can think about your brain as having, it's a zero-sum game. You have 100% brain at your service, okay? So now you fill it up with crying babies or with all kind of errands or things you need to accomplish. Everything that you store in your mind as something that I need to do and add stress in my life takes away from this 100%. So you're left with, I'm just throwing numbers here. You're left with only 20% of cognitive availability for all the other things. It could be for creative thinking. And if you think about, Vipassana retreats or all this meditation and Buddhism conversation talk, then you think about how much do I have in my mind? How many resources do I have? How much of my resources are available to appreciate the flower that's in front of me? If you are staying at the flower, but you're busy with millions of things that bother you, then you almost don't see this flower. You just, something in your brain, just label it flower and you move on. But if you could bring yourself to a state that it's really, your brain is almost empty or much less loaded, then it's like, oh, look at this flower. It's like it has all these petals and it has all these seeds and blah, blah, blah. So cognitive load is definitely something that is necessary. That's a fact of life. We can't move around our life, live our lives without loading ourselves. That's maybe the privilege of monks living on a mountain with nothing to worry about. But all of us running our everyday lives, there is some load. We just need to realize that when we are really loaded, we have less for other things.
Responding to our children more presently, mindfully, non-reactively, right? So the key is to recognize in what state of mind you're in, And of course, there are things to do that you also have practical suggestions in your book. But am I hearing that mindfulness is an antidote to this, or is it one of the strongest ones?
I do think it's one of the strongest ones. And another aspect I realized about my book only retrospectively was that I came across also critical to some extent of mindfulness or meditation. And I do stand behind what I said there, but the bottom line is very intuitive. There's different times for different states. So you do want to be empty minded, you want to be mindful and without load for certain situations in life and for certain activities in your day. But in some cases, you don't want this empty mind, right? You want to be stimulated. I don't think that being completely mindful is the right state of mind for maximal creativity, for example. So it does remove the load. It does amplify the way you appreciate your environment. But for you to be more creative, maybe you need more stimulation. You do need more things going on. But mindfulness is great for, I don't want to say emptying the mind because this makes it shallow, but really to get rid of ruminations. That's another thing that is good for. So I definitely recommend people trying, weeks of silence here and there, but I don't think it's the remedy for everything. And we just need to empty our mind and remain empty.
I think that was the part that spoke to me the most. I think it was so brave of you to write about that. And it's sort of intuitively, we know that you can't be mindful all the time. And when you're mindful, you're not in your experience. And what I loved about your book is the part about immersion, so there are those different states, right? There's the immersion, which I'm going to ask you about. There's the mindfulness and the mind wandering, and they all have a role and, benefits in our life. We don't want to just be mindful and pay attention to the experience. We want to have the experience. But can we manipulate those states as an experiencer of those states?
I think as far as I can, the furthest that I can take the readers to is just being aware of these different states. Okay. So if you realize, first of all, that there are different states, then we're just not subject being led, by our swings and not really understanding that. No, you have to understand that, my simplest example is that if I'm sleep deprived, I know I'm going to be grumpy. So don't send important emails, try to avoid people overall. Maybe my inhibition is reduced, so I might be a little more creative, but less appropriate in company. So I can take my state into account and adjust my activities. What you're asking about is as if whether I could make my ungrumpy myself. Can I make myself not grumpy? It's no, let's accept the states as givens, but just be aware of them and work with them, right? So that you're tired, do this such and such. And tired is not really state of mind. But if I know that I'm in a new city and I now want to explore the city, I go with this. It's okay, this is what I'm here for. But realizing that, as I said before, being mindful is not a solution for everything. And actually, it robs you of some experiences where you're the observer or the witness of your own experience.
But then meanwhile, how do you develop awareness of various states but through mindfulness, right? It's kind of ironic.
I'm not sure that you need to be completely mindful. I think that you have to be aware. As I said before, I didn't finish this, I guess. First, you have to understand that there are different states, and then you need to recognize them, right? So now I'm jumpy. So I'll give you an example. It was before yesterday. My middle daughter, she's a soldier now. So we have this habit that they acquired, I guess, when in the American school system, which is very nice. At the end of the day, they see me, it's like, how was your day? We ask each other, how was your day? It always develops a conversation. I told my daughter that all of them inherited the ADHD from me. So I told them, I couldn't focus the entire day. And I was really pissed that I couldn't focus because I had things to accomplish. But then just an hour before I had to finish my day, and I had an hour left, boom, everything was bursting and I was really on target, and I did. And I realized my mind for the entire day was fighting, to get its freedom to work on what it wanted to work, right? I'm trying to direct my brain to work on this document, but it keeps pulling me off and I'm not aware of it. And then it only makes you be more at peace with the fact that you're not focused. Don't fight it, but rather recognize where you are and realize that there will be fruits to this labor, but it's not something that, we do have methods and we also play with them in the lab of inducing a certain state of mind. making you more immersed. You remember how the book begins with this provocative example. So the idea there was that in our current state, to be in immersion, we need these extreme experiences, right? BDSM or roller coaster or whatever. But I wish to live my life so that, every sip from my tea would be as immersive, right? So then I talk with you and I sip my tea. It's like, oh, I really relish all the flavors and whatever. But we can't do this. So there's not much we can do. But, again, my kids, when they take a candy that they've been desiring for the last hour, and when they take the candy and I see them with the candy on the phone and say, no, stop everything. Just enjoy your candy. Just focus on the candy that you're eating. I know it's a little mindfulness, but it's more like don't be distracted when you're doing something important for you. So there are little tricks that we can, there's like a little appendix in the book that my editor luckily forced me to do, but because people seem to like it. But there are some tricks that or some methods that I suggest to people, but I think it's very individual. I think that the first and the major part is to recognize that there are states and start to understand what state you're in and work with it. And again, it's like all my examples are with kids, I guess. So when I come back from work, if I'm upset or maybe raise my voice with my little daughter who's an angel, and I tell her, it's like, no, it's not because of you. Remember, I'm never angry at you. If I'm angry, you should stop me and say, what happened at work that day? And, it's like they know they cannot get me upset. They just, if they see me upset, they realize it came from somewhere else. So this is like working with your state and working with your limits. But yeah, we all should seek more immersive experiences. That's for sure.
Immersive experiences can be both negative and positive, right? Can we talk about the associations, the word associations to boost the mood? I think that was so cool. I played with it with my daughter too.
Yeah.
I think this all makes sense, but all I'm thinking about by reading this is when we feel safe, we're more open to experiences, the round spaces, to people, and we're creative. When we are under threat, the threat system is activated. We're constricted, we're reactive. It's like it goes back to biology, like safe or under threat, right?
Right. Yes. In many respects, this state of mind, we need to think about it as a very adaptive tool. It's not something random that, you're in this state now, very capriciously, and then another state. The state, if it works according to, what nature meant it for it to be, it is adapted to the situation you're in, right? Just like you dress in a certain way if you go to a museum and dress in another way if you go to the beach, then your mind needs to be different if you're teaching kids now in a classroom versus if you are a student in a class, or if you go to meet with friends versus work meeting versus meeting with strangers. So all these conditions require a different state of mind, right? And we should understand that the brain adapts to the situation, and every state of mind comes with biases and dispositions that's supposed to serve you. The friction comes when the state of mind doesn't match the situation, right? So if I'm coming to a classical concert and I'm hyperactive, then, because of whatever happened before, great news, this is correlated, then this is not the right activity for me. Or if I'm restless, I cannot sit down and write something boring because I need to be more focused and more calm down. So the associations. So our mind is highly associative, right? So we store everything we know, everything we remember, everything in memory is really connected with each other. It's a giant web of things that we know, things that we want, things we've experienced, things we fear, things we desire, everything, and facts like what's the capital of Spain or of France, but also how was my own breakfast and how was my interaction with this lady at work today, right? It could be autobiographical or it could be factual. So we have this giant web of associations. And we found, and others also before us and after, found that you can travel on this. Your thinking is really like traveling on this web of associations, of semantic nodes, or semantic concepts, right? You're thinking about table, right? So you might be thinking table, and then you move to the node of wood, right? And then wood is tree, and tree is forest, and forest is camping, and camping is bears, and bears is Winnie the Pooh, and Winnie the Pooh is honey. And there's a chain that your mind chose to walk on. And what we discovered was that, first of all, this won't be surprising at all, that more creative people jump with their association further. So they provide more refreshing, less mundane, more remote associations. So if I ask somebody who's in a very creative state, give me a means of transportation, they can say elevator, because otherwise, most people will say car, but somebody who's more creative, this is a legitimate response. They provide it as quickly as you provide the car, but they go further. So either the semantic web is structured differently, or they just jump somewhere else. But this is one characteristic of creative people, creative thinking. And all people, by this theory of ours of state of mind, all people can be more creative or less creative. This is not like a destiny. So we've discovered and published a lot about it. And now there's this startup company that really dwells on this, that people in good mood think more broadly. The associations they will provide are more broad. So they'll jump from a table to forest, right? Whereas if you take somebody who's in negative mood, you say table, they say chair, fork, knife. Everything is cool, but it's all in the same vicinity. It stays within the same context. So we found that people in good mood are more associative / more creative. This was actually found before us. But what we found was that the other direction can also work. And if I make you think more broadly by showing you words that jump in more expansive manner, then I can improve your mood. And now we've shown this also with depressed individuals, not only with healthy individuals, that we can actually affect symptoms of depression. I think this is stunning that we can actually show you words that expand in different manner and manipulate your mood like this. So that is also, again, is something that we're really excited about and we can play with, and there are different ways of doing it.
Are these chain of words associations pre-made, or you ask the person to make it on the spot for themselves? That was unclear for me.
Right. There was a reason it was unclear for me, because I wasn't clear enough that the first demonstration we performed was we didn't leave anything for chance. We generated list of words. And again, for an experiment, you need to have a control. So one subject, one participant will see what I told you with like table, wood, forest, Winnie the Pooh. And another will have table, plate, knife, fork, and blah, blah, blah. So one of them stayed in the same neighborhood, the other one expanded, but started from the same place. And we showed that those that read the expansive lists of words improved their mood. But since then, we've developed many other, the application we have, the app we have in the company, you have actually to arrange words in certain manner. So you can arrange it yourself. When you play with your daughter with the free associations, you can ask her to, give me something that's surprising. Still related, right? People in schizophrenia can generate associations that others don't see the connection. But the rest of us can be still creative. So you tell your daughter, I say a word, you tell me something that will be surprising, will be far, but will be related, right? So you say, let's think about something. So I'm thinking pen, and I would say feather, or maybe, right? So this is even not remote enough, but still you think about, what can you make? You talk with her about what's the immediate ones, right? Pen, paper, or pen, pencil. Let's eliminate the first one and jump to the second one. So I think this free association is fun anywhere you do it. People love it. But if you make them more remote and kind of make an extra effort to go further, I think that could make a difference and make them happy.
The reason I was doing this with her, because she didn't want to do her homework. She felt, resistant. She said, I don't want to do my homework. And I said, let's play a game. And I was hoping to influence her mood, to make her think more broadly so that then she can go and tackle her homework. But we had a lot of fun. I'm not sure if it helped the homework, but I think this could be used strategically, for parents too, right? If you're in a bad mood or you have this cognitive load, maybe you can play with those things and alter your mood. I think this gives us something to do to change our states. And another thing, I'm jumping from thing to another thing, but the labeling was fascinating in the mindfulness chapter. Can you talk about that too?
Yeah, I also think it's fascinating. And we've started research on this in the lab, but it hasn't concluded sufficiently yet. It takes time. So the trick was, and I'm repeating some things that you've read in the book, but I'm assuming your listeners haven't read it yet, so I will be redundant here for you. The idea, a good friend of mine, who's an expert in mindfulness, dragged me to this first meditation retreat up north in Israel in a kibbutz. And I was completely clueless. And like I do with many other things, including yoga and, squash and all this, I jump straight to the advanced level. So I'm always the last one in class, but still I'm always challenged. I like it. So I went to this retreat where people usually are much more advanced, and I was miserable because I really couldn't harness my thoughts. I couldn't do anything. My mind always drifted. So we were cheating at night. We would just take walks, she and I, and talking about science, life, whatever. So I told her about this, and she said, here's a trick that we use. I'm not sure she called it labeling, but the idea was that you take a certain thought and you rate it or you label it in different dimensions. And the dimensions can be really simple and silly. So you have a certain thought and you can, let's say, choose 3 dimensions. You can say, is it about the past, this thought, about the present or the future? You can label it, is it about me or about others? And you can rate it also in valence. Is it negative, neutral, or positive? So you take a certain thought you have. Let's say I talk with you and there's a thought that, no, let's say I'm just sitting here and I'm worried about my boss telling me I need to talk with you tomorrow, right? And this thought keeps bugging me. And let's say I do meditation and this thought keeps coming to me. So I say, is it about me or about others? It's about me. I don't care about the boss. In this case, it's about me, right? Is it past, future, or present? This is future, right? So it's me, future, and it's, I don't know, let's label it negative. You don't have to be correct here as long as you label it, right? So it's me, future, negative. And miraculously, this was really shocking for me. Most thoughts, if you're suffering from trauma and you have some intrusive thoughts from PTSD, you can't really get rid of it so easily. But everyday nuisances and thoughts that bother us can be dealt with this method, because and I said it in the book, I almost heard this whoosh, when you send an email and it says whoosh. So the moment I labeled a thought, it disappeared. And of course, I'm a scientist, even though I try not to be a scientist when I go to meditation retreats, but I can't help it. So it's like, okay, let's play with it because the thought disappeared. Let's try to bring it back. And in most cases, I just couldn't bring back let's bring back the thought and hang on to it. And it dissipates. It really dissipates. And it does, it might relate, and here I'm kind of speculating, to things that Freud and others talked about when, unsettled or unconsolidated memories. So when you encounter a new thing or you have a new thought, usually if it's all okay, then you store it somewhere. It's as if you put it on a shelf in a library and it doesn't haunt you. It doesn't bother you. But if for some reason you didn't store it properly, maybe because it was a trauma, maybe you just you wanted to repress everything about it because it was so unpleasant, and then you didn't make the effort, you didn't do what's necessary to store it properly, and it just keeps back calling your attention. Hey, I'm here. This thought is telling you, I'm here. You have to take care of me. And you try to push it away, you try to avoid it, but it keeps coming back. And once you label it, it's akin to like treating this thought. And once you treated it, it is on a shelf and then stops bothering you. But again, it is speculation. We didn't do studies on this, but it is a fact that, at least in my experience and others that practice this labeling, it does help getting rid of, everyday bothers, not something that, it's too major.
Oh, I see. But there is this saying, right? What we resist persists. But when you embrace it, yeah, it diminishes its value, or whoosh, it disappears. I have to play with that. I haven't used it in my life. But yeah, I guess with traumatic memories, there is also emotions that are floating, that are not felt, right? So that makes it hard.
Yeah, emotions are like the strongest glue for memories. So it's really hard to forget. It's really hard to stop associating. In the lab, I can make you think about blue squares as scary, because I keep pairing them, maybe subconsciously, but very quickly, pairing blue squares with negative stuff and red squares with positive things. So I show you squares. It's like, okay, I like this one more. Why? I don't know, right? And I can extinct this. I can switch, and then after a little while, start pairing the red ones with negative and the blue ones with positive. And now you change alliances. You start liking the blue one better, right? So I can change your association implicitly or explicitly with certain stimulus. But when people saw friends exploding in the war, or they see, a woman that went through some traumatic experience, then it's really not that easy to come and say, okay, let's associate this room now with something different. Let's have a party in this room. No, the experience was so strong and so negative that it will take more than just pairing it, with the cotton balls and cotton candy, rather. Yeah.
Is the mechanism, though, the same? So sort of reconsolidating the memory, processing things, labeling things over and over and over, I guess, until, right? Yeah.
Yes. But as I said, with trauma, it takes more than that.
Yeah.
Serious traumas require serious treatment. It's not just let's play with associations.
Yeah, I understand that. I also found the simulations very interesting in terms of also, I'm going to ask you, can it be applied to parenting? For example, if a parent visualizes a situation where he comes home and he's treating his children nicely, engages with them presently and vividly, he has this beautiful visualization. When he's rested, he can retrieve this visualization and play with it. Can that help to a parent who is a rageaholic or a yelling person? Can this exercise in mind, in simulation, help? Because the mind doesn't know the difference if this is happening in real life or in imagination. Does that prepare you for real life? When the real life is here, maybe you yell less, or maybe because you simulated and practiced in your mind the other version. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, yes. And again, I think awareness of these issues is key because I can give you, I mean, I don't have to go far to give you examples, even just from today. So I picked up my daughter and came here, and I know I was rushed with her because I need to accomplish a few things before our Zoom here. So I was really impatient to her sweet stories. And then I paused and I said to myself, you remember how bad you feel afterwards. She goes to sleep at night and you think like, oh my God, she had these sweet stories and I was divided. I was thinking somewhere else, right? So I simulate the future. And that's what we talk about when we talk about future simulations. They're always based on some experience. You just need to be conscientious and really go back to visit these memories like, hey, Moshe, how were you thinking last time this thing happened, right? I almost wake her up. It's like, let's tell me the stories again because I'm sorry I missed the opportunity before, right? And of course, I won't do it. But next time when I feel like I'm this, if again, the presence of mind, this is the critical aspect here because okay, let's just stop everything for 7 minutes, listen to everything she said, then apologize that from now on you need to be busy with other things and everything is accomplished. So not being led by our mind and not being subjects to our thoughts, but rather observe them to some extent and manipulate what you can. Obviously, we can't really tell ourselves what to think about, but we do, the main role of memory, we realize, is to serve the future, not really to reminisce on our wedding or whatever. So it's something that is there to help us prepare better for next time. So if I know that after she goes to sleep, I won't feel I'll feel really frustrated that I missed this opportunity and I feel like a bad parent and all this chain of thoughts, then if I'm present when realize that how I behave now, it's like, okay, let's take a step back and preempt these subsequent feelings.
Yeah. So as we're getting to the conclusion here, do you have the model of your brain on your desk or nearby?
No, it's in the office.
It's in the office?
I have 3 offices. This is my favorite. This is my home office. But again, I can send you a picture. If you remind me, I'll send you a few pictures of whatever you want, and then you'll see the picture of my brain.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what I have? I have a tiny model of my brain. Just a second.
I want to see it.
So when they printed my brain in the 3D printer, they had extra ink. So they also made a small one.
Oh.
It'd actually be like a keychain, I think.
Oh, it's so cute.
Let's see.
It looks like a cauliflower.
Yes, I know.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
You know what's funny about it? Maybe I don't remember if I said it in the book, but I was at Harvard then, and a big donor was supposed to come visit. And the director of our center said, everybody needs to impress this donor, but there are many of us. There's a corridor of laboratories. So each PI, principal investigator, had to stand in the doorstep of their lab. And they had like 3 minutes to speak with the donor to impress them, right? And he goes, well, let's see if he chooses the one project or really like the center. So it was this billionaire, the president of Harvard, and the president of MIT. I was in a joint affiliation. So this esteemed delegation walks in this corridor. And that morning I was maybe the first or second in the world to have this because this center I was in was really advanced with MRIs and 3D printing just started and I had my brain and I had this epiphany of telling, hey, you have my brain in your computer, just print it out. So I was, I think, the second or the third. Now a famous chef in Israel, a friend of mine, also has his. So like many people have it now. So it was the morning that I received it, and it was in my office on the table. So this guy, esteemed colleagues, esteemed delegation walks in the corridor and talk with each. And I prepared printouts of brains with activations and see how we're going to cure depression. That was I'm going to show him, here's activity, we can, blah, 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 we can deal with depression. So as they entered, as they came to my doorstep, I showed them the printouts, and one of them peeks over my shoulder. It's like, what is this thing on the desk there? I said, this is a printout of my brain. They moved me aside, and the three of them started playing like kids. Oh, you dropped your brain. Don't lose your brain. All these silly jokes. So really, they couldn't care about my depression solution. So yeah, I can understand why. Think about it. It's such an important organ. Maybe, well, you can't really say the most important organ, but you can't rank them. But it is very mysterious, very exotic organ in our body, and still we don't see it, right? It's not like your hand that you look at it all the time. So people are really fascinated by this. Yes.
So when you said that your friend also printed his brain, now when you saw his brain and yours, visibly, are there differences by looking at the brain?
I didn't really compare, boys and comparing. No, we're not it's like.
I'm just curious, it's like. Yeah.
I saw the picture of his brain. No, if you see the older one, the bigger one, I don't think you can see here, but you see these curves, right? These
yes,
we call it these foldings. So as we get older, our cortex becomes thinner and thinner.
Really?
And there's more gaps. I think that if I would scan my brain now, 15 years later, and print it out, it will look different. There's more space between the folds. So that's why I don't want to scan it again. But all of us lose neuronal volume over the years. And comparing brains really doesn't make a difference. You have to compare your brain to your previous brain, like your brain before, because there's so many individual differences that you can't really.
And tell me 5 fun facts about the brain in general, or the mind. What's exciting that maybe
You're surprising me here. I need to go to prepare for my next Zoom, but I do need to tackle this. Okay, so 5 exotic things about the brain. First of all, I think most people know it by now, but it finishes maturing late in life. So the majority of the brain kind of accomplishes most of the development in early age, but the main part that makes us different than all other animals, the prefrontal cortex, finishes maturing only around the age of 25. And the teenager kids that we don't understand their behavior or their taste or whatever, it's just because the part that actually, what I said before, learn from your experience for the future, they cannot. They don't have enough experience. They don't have enough past to project for the future. So they don't understand consequences. They don't understand the outcome and the implications of what they do. So this is one of the things. Be more patient with the younger kids, because my oldest son, who is now 23, would kick the soccer ball in the living room and almost break this expensive picture on the wall. And my wife gets mad. It's like, oh, calm down. It doesn't have prefrontal cortex yet. That's why it does this. So we need to be minded of this. Yeah. So the second thing is really the extent to which the brain is plastic. The way I like to show in demonstrations in lectures, that I show you something blurry and I ask you what it is, and nobody knows what it is because it's really blurry. And then I change it and I show them that it's actually a picture of a horse that I blurred. And then I show them the blurred image again. And everybody sees the horse in an instant. Like 2 seconds, you saw the real horse, and now you cannot unsee the horse. So I just demonstrate to them that our brains keep changing all the time. It's not only when you're in young age that you're able to learn these things. So this is also fascinating, that our brain is malleable and changes a lot. Okay, maybe one more. Well, I just had a conversation with my neighbors. They talked about female versus male brains. So I told them that because of what I told you before, there are so many individual differences that, I feel bad that we're not there yet, but I cannot take your brain or anybody random from the street and scan them in MRI and say, this person is depressed or this person is creative, right? We cannot really read the brain like that. And maybe we will never be able to. Maybe that's not how we should read it, but still there's a lot of mystery. Yeah, maybe that's enough. If you feel like the need for more, I can email you.
No, that's enough. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Have a wonderful day. Take care.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.